About the lack of communication, you say there was communication. I want to focus on those two specific critical facts. Are you saying that the CIA did communicate to the FBI that those two people that you suspected as being terrorists had a multiple entry visa into the United States and had entered the United States? Are you saying that in that communication, that general word you're using, that those two facts were communicated orally to the FBI? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is the identities, the names of the individuals.
No.
But the issue of the visa is problematic.
All right.
We have no evidence that that piece of information was communicated.
And that's critical information.
The joint inquiry has determined that the intelligence community as a whole was not on a war footing before September 11th. For example, knowledge of the DCI's declaration appears to have been limited. Some senior managers at NSA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, were aware of the statement, but many in the FBI had not heard of it. For example, the assistant director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division testified to the joint inquiry that he was not specifically aware of that declaration of war. Senior officers in other components of the government, including the Defense Department and the U.S. military, apparently were also unaware of the declaration. When asked whether he knew that the United States had been at war with bin Laden, Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage responded, quote, "I was briefed in January and February 2001, leading to my hearings in March before the U.S. Senate. The term at war was, to my knowledge, not used. There was no question, though, that we were in a struggle with al-Qaeda, and al-Qaeda was the very first thing that the administration took at the deputy's level," end quote. The joint inquiry also reviewed whether the DCI's declaration of war had any real effect in the covert action area prior to September 11, 2001. Cofer Black, the former CTC chief, explained in a statement to the joint inquiry, after 9/11, the gloves came off. Resources dedicated to counterterrorism generally increased during the 1990s. Notwithstanding the Director of Central Intelligence December 1998 exhortation to spare no resources, however, counterterrorism had to compete with other intelligence priorities. Senior CIA officers pointed to, for example, a variety of regional and global issues as intelligence priorities that required resource allocations. In testimony before the joint inquiry, the DCI George Tenet took note of those competing intelligence requirements. Quote, "As I declared war against al-Qaeda in 1998, in the aftermath of the East Africa embassy bombings, we were in our 5th year of round-the-clock support to Operation Southern Watch in Iraq. Just 3 months earlier, we were embroiled in answering questions on the India and Pakistan nuclear tests, trying to determine how we could surge more people to understanding and countering weapons of mass destruction proliferation. In early 1999, we surged more than 800 analysts and redirected collection assets from across the intelligence community to support the NATO bombing campaign against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia," end quote. The only substantial infusion of personnel to counterterrorism occurred after September 11, 2001, when the number of CIA personnel assigned to the Counterterrorism Center nearly doubled from approximately 400 to approximately 800, and additional contractors were hired in support of the Counterterrorism Center. No comparable shift of resources occurred in December 1998 after the DCI's declaration of war, in December 1999 during the Millennium Crisis, or in October 2000 after the attack on the USS Cole. NSA Director Michael Hayden described a similar situation before September 11th. Quote, "We, like everyone else at the table, were stretched thin in September. The war against terrorism was our #1 priority. We had about 5 #1 priorities. And we had to balance what we were doing against all of them," end quote. General Hayden asserted that he knew what NSA had to do to target bin Laden effectively before September 11th, but was unable to obtain intelligence community support and resources for that purpose. Quote, "Given all the other intelligence priorities, it would have been difficult at that time within the intelligence community or the Department of Defense to accept the kind of resource decisions that would have been necessary to make our effort against the target more robust. NSA was focused heavily on a range of regional and global issues. Our resources, both human and financial, were in decline. Our efforts in 2000 to churn money internally were not accepted by the intelligence community. Its reliance on signals intelligence had made it reluctant to give it up, end quote. The joint inquiry also learned that even after the Director of Central Intelligence declaration of war, there was considerable variation in the degree to which FBI organized joint terrorism task forces prioritized and coordinated efforts targeting bin Laden and Al Qaeda in the United States. While the Bureau's New York office took the lead in the vast majority of counterterrorism investigations concerning bin Laden, many other FBI offices around the country were unaware of the magnitude of the threat. In an interview, former National Coordinator for Counterterrorism Richard Clark contended that FBI field officers, except New York, were clueless about counterterrorism and Al Qaeda and did not make them priorities. Former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger testified before the joint inquiry, quote, "What we have learned since 9/11 makes clear that the FBI as an organization was not focused on the counterterrorism mission," end quote.